Hello. How are we doing?
Hello. Yeah, good, thanks. How's you?
Good. So, we'll do some housekeeping before we start. First of all, we've noticed that Journeying John is in the chat. This is a friend of Ed's and apparently has an obsession with orange. So,
He really does. John, you need to lay off the orange, man, seriously.
reach out to him.
He needs help. He needs, I don't know if there are 12-step programs for people like that, but whatever it is, he needs it. He's also a very good friend and a very dear person, but he needs to lay off the orange. It's wearing thin.
Is this because of your Dutch roots?
Yeah, no, it's exactly because I'm half Dutch. But my other names, just before he starts in the chat, are Milky Bar Kid is one, and also Gold Member from Austin Powers as well. Because this is what happens when you do happen to be half Dutch, living amongst English savages.
And amongst the people that we don't normally see, we have Helix the Rogue. That's a new name.
Helix, I know him on Twitter. Hey, dude.
Cool. Amy's joining us from the hospital in Kentucky, I think.
Amy, I hope everything in the hospital goes well and they don't end up doing those horrible things that hospitals do to people in 2023. I think she's already got an enema lined up, so I'm not quite sure how well that's progressed yet. But I did post something about remember and stay out the splash zone. Way too much information. Seriously, too much information. The less said about that, the better.
Right, so here we go, people. So on instructions of our dear leader Ben, the chat will be. You can sort it out amongst yourselves. So the chat will be addressed towards the end of the show. Anyone who wishes to get any questions or anything answered, if you post anything with a donation, you will definitely get addressed in the chat. Unless your name's Frankie, in which case you have to wait till Friday. But yeah, so you can support us at Ko-fi, as you see there, ko-fi.com/chasing descent. If you use that online and during the show, what will happen is a donation would come up and anything you type in within reason will be read out. So there's a big list of banned words, obviously, because we can't have you saying naughty things that would maybe get the channel struck. So you can type a message in, it gets read out in a suitably robotic, non-AI voice, along with the amount that you've donated, and that would definitely count towards you being prioritised for any questions or chat at the end. You can also join the channel using YouTube. You can also subscribe on Ko-fi as well if you want to make it a regular monthly, or you can do a one-off, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. There are different levels, and you can do super chats where you can drop in 5 or 10 or whatever it is, and that comes up on the chat, and we prioritise them as well. So that's how we're trying to grift. That's how we're trying to make some money. The preferred method is always Ko-fi because they don't take a lot of money compared to YouTube. YouTube take 30% of what you donate, just so you're aware. But hey, right. Let's start, shall we, Ed? So I'm going to take us back to ancient Egypt tonight, and this isn't an Ed presentation, so don't get excited, people. This is led by me, so I'm just going to bumble on about Egypt and stuff like that. So what it was, I was watching something the other day about Moses and where he came from, and then I got interested in it. I started going down a rabbit hole, as you would, So I ended up with all these conflicting and different theories. But the one I like is the one that takes us back to ancient Egypt. And when I say ancient Egypt, I'm talking way, way back to 1st, 2nd, 3rd dynasty. So we're way back in just after the Younger Dryas, I think. So we're talking about, it could possibly be when the Sphinx was built, or even if it wasn't, we're not quite sure, but probably before the pyramids. So we're right back there, and we have the pharaohs at that point were apparently monotheistic, and I didn't realise this because I thought, have you ever seen you know Egypt has always got loads of different gods, don't you, Ed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Anubis and Ra and
Well, I thought they were multi-theistic from the start, but apparently not. Apparently they started off kind of monotheistic.
I thought they were. I mean, I thought that Ra was there.
Yeah, well, I think
the main
when the kind
main
of
god, the
kind of main dynastic Egypt started round about what, say 4000 BC, something like that, right? So they were definitely, I think they were definitely multi-theistic, and that's where they had Ra and Anubis and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, when you go further back, it appears that they only believed in one god, and so what we have is we have the pharaohs do all sorts of weird things. You know, they marry people from different lands and all that. And what happens is this pharaoh called Amenhotep and his wife, who was called Taye, who was apparently of Asian descent. So that would maybe account for the weird look of the dude that we're going to talk about, because who we're going to talk about is Akin, what's his name?
Sorry to interrupt. By Asian, do you mean like Indian Asian?
Chinese.
Or Chinese Asian? Right, so Far East.
I don't consider Indians as Asians because their official designation is dark-skinned Caucasian, believe it or not.
According to what I'm seeing, it was only Akhenaten that tried to introduce monotheistic worship.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about. So it's Akhenaten, who is the weird-looking dude. So he's not. He's the one that when they made what would you call it, statues and things of him. He basically said, don't portray me as a buff guy, just portray me as I am. And that's why you see statues of Akhenaten, and he's got big lips and a weird shaped head. And
because the Egyptians, they didn't the pharaohs believe in incest, which is one of the reasons why they were all deformed. There was lots and lots of inbreeding, because Tutankhamun was supposed to have been quite.
I'm not sure. I didn't go into that
as well.
But I think
I might be wrong.
I think they certainly believed in portraying themselves as a living god. But I don't think Akhenaten did. And actually, I found out that you know how like you get Tutankhamun, right? And you get that Amen, you know, the Amen part. Mm-hmm. And then there was Amenhotep, you know, who was like Akhenaten's dad was Amenhotep III or something like that. So the Amen part, if you've got Amen in their name, then they believe in multi gods, multiple gods. They believe.
I didn't know that.
If they've got Aten means they believe in the one god. So you get the Amens and the Atens. I know it sounds crazy, but it's like two different sects. And what's his name? Akhenaten did try and take the Egyptians back to a more monotheistic kind of approach, you know. But the problem is he was fighting at that point against a really entrenched, what would you call them, priesthood. That were, I mean, they really had the control of everything because everything was secret.
The civil servants of the day.
Yeah, and they had everything locked down. They had they had the keys to the kingdom and everything. So he was kind of fighting against them. Now, if we go back slightly, right? So Amenhotep's dad, no, not Amen, right? Amenhotep's dad had a pal called Yusuf, right? who was his kind of prime minister, right-hand man type guy, or as they called him. We're not going down the Game of Thrones route, but apparently in Egypt they called him fan bearer. so maybe he wafted a fan. But anyway, this was his kind of pal, and he definitely, when you see that, I mean, and there are hieroglyphs that depict him, and there was a grave and a tomb that indicated that this was a real person, and Yusuf, i.e. YU-SAF or something like that, in Aramaic apparently means Joseph.
Well, I mean, it's Yusuf.
Yeah. So the connection there is apparently what they're thinking is. Do you remember at school when you did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? And Joseph was the guy that went to the Pharaoh and could interpret his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
They reckon this might be the basis for this guy, Joseph.
Okay.
Right? So then... Then we go further back to, if we're back in the 9,000 BCs, which is taking us back to 11,500 years ago, 12,000 years ago, which is round about the Younger Dryas. We've got this guy called Ramosis, okay, and his basis is he's an Aten, i.e. he believes in the one God, and when you look at Ramosis and you look at Moses, which in the Greek then becomes Moses, so what they're thinking is this guy might be the guy that is the basis for the biblical myth about, well, I say myth because I don't know if it's true or not, so I mean, and we'll go in, there are other Moseses out there, so we'll go down that route as well. But this guy might be the basis for some of the biblical myths about about Moses. But the whole story's a bit completely the wrong way round for the Bible, because what happens is, they basically have a big disagreement between the multi-theists and the monotheists. And it's not that he's escaping from Egypt, it's they're having a big fight, and there's depictions of a massive sea battle, right, which then leads us back to parting of the waters and all that, and eventually the monotheists get driven out. So they didn't escape, they were driven out, and they suffered the biggest losses, not the Egyptian multi-theists. So what you're looking at there is basically early start of propaganda for for all the different wars that are going on. So these guys were driven out and driven into the desert, and that's where they think this Moses thing comes from. So he becomes basically the biblical part of Moses. And this is a good, I think, 1,000 years before the Bible even gets down to starting being written, the Old Testament.
Hang on a minute. I thought that the Hebrews, that the whole Exodus thing was actually to get away from the Pharaoh.
Exactly. That's what they think. But the thing was, the Pharaoh was driven out, right, because he was a monotheist. So the whole thing's really... That's why I said it's completely upside down. But then again...
But surely the Hebrews are monotheists as well.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
But what about the timeline? Because before, as we were starting the show, I did a little bit of quick research, and one of the things that historians and biblical scholars are skeptical about is timelines with relation to this. So biblical Exodus is estimated to have happened in around 1446 BCE, so before the Christian era. I think that's before the current era, whatever the current politically correct term is.
Yeah, but I suspect that's a bit. I suspect that's a bit early.
Well, Akhenaten was approximately 1353 to 1336. There's also theories that it's Tutankhamun, which was 1333, 1323.
No, I don't think.
And then
I don't think it was Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was back on the multi-theist side of things.
Well, it was only Akhenaten that seems to be the one that as soon as Akhenaten died, the whole society switched back to
and that's when they had the fight, and that's when Ramesses, I believe, got driven out and took off.
But there's no record of a massive exodus of Hebrew slaves under any pharaoh that fits the biblical timeline of Moses and Exodus.
Exactly, because they weren't Hebrew slaves. That's what this theory is saying. They weren't Hebrew slaves, they were Egyptians.
Right.
So this is before what this theory is saying is this is before Hebrews were basically on the scene, before the Hebrew writings started. And what's happened is the writings of the Old Testament Bible have taken these stories and ran with it. That's the claim. Right.
Well, that's not unheard of when it comes to the Bible. I mean, I'm not a biblical scholar, so all of this stuff is kind of new to me. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, anything's possible. But from what I know, the biblical account is that Moses was born into a Hebrew family.
Yeah, that's right.
With his mother hiding him to avoid the Egyptians killing Hebrew baby boys. Which doesn't fit with him being born an Egyptian royal. No,
it doesn't fit at all, because this story basically has Moses as an Egyptian, and nothing to do. In fact, this story doesn't involve Hebrews or Hebrew slaves or anything like that at all. There's no 12 tribes. There's nothing to do with it. And actually, when you look back at the 12 tribes thing, you got to question that as well, because they say that the 12 tribes represent the 12 months, but there wasn't necessarily 12 months way back then, because wasn't it the Romans that introduced the 2 extra months for Augustus and Julius for their 2 Caesars? So July and August. I think it was the Romans that brought that in round about 1000 BC or something like that. When they were in charge in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So. This is a completely different story from what you hear in the Bible, and the problem is you don't know what's right. You never do. But there are images of large scale hieroglyphs of large scale sea battles and things that kind of tie in with the timeline here. Now you got to be very careful with Egypt as well, because they had this terrible habit of just chopping everything off and redoing it with the next what would you call it? The next pharaoh or the next dynasty. They would just basically erase history and rewrite it as their own. Maybe kind of like what we do just now,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that going on in recent times. I mean, the Sphinx. They reckon that the Sphinx originally had a different head. Because the pharaoh's head in relation to the rest of the Sphinx's body, that just doesn't make sense. But there's all sorts of evidence of water erosion. I mean, I do happen to be one of the people that believes that the timeline of the pyramids and the Sphinx in official history is completely wrong. I think they're an awful lot older, possibly dating back pre-flood, maybe even before that. I mean, I've seen some fascinating theories that the pyramids were some sort of ancient power source, and that they have all of the right different elements that you would need to actually be able to create power, and then with the outer coating to actually broadcast that power wirelessly, a la Tesla. And I mean, again, it's all supposition. Mainstream archaeologists would call us conspiracy theories and fact check us and demand that we were censored. Yeah, but that's the whole point of these chats is to just kind of explore these things.
I think you're right, and the problem is that people seem to have very definite views about what is set in stone and what isn't, and I use that term inadvertently as a pun, because most of it is stone tablets or hieroglyphs or Sumerian or Mesopotamian writing. In fact, the theory around this Moses is that basically he's derived from Mesopotamia rather than from that part of Egypt, you know. So it's a bit convoluted and a bit different from the Bible. I think it gives you an alternative view. I think the problem with the Bible is the Bible's a collection of disparate stories that have been thrown together, and some have been included and others haven't, that just happen to follow the narrative, you know.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book lent to me by a friend of mine called Lost Christianities, which looks back at some of the Gospels that there were some that were left out, that there's still a record of. There's others like the Nag Hammadi scrolls that were found, which are completely new Gospels. There's things like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and things like that, which completely upend certainly the view, the current church's view of who and what Mary Magdalene was. And that, I mean, that ties into Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And so, I mean, there's a lot of certainly biblical history that, I mean, you have to remember that the current, the New Testament was essentially put together in, what is it, in the Council of Nicaea in 340 something.
Yeah.
Which is like nearly 350 years after the death of Christ.
Yeah.
And they're presuming to work out who he was and what he did, and
we didn't have Snopes. We didn't have Snopes then to check the facts.
Well, no, but I mean, they didn't have the methods for preserving knowledge. I mean, it was all papyrus scrolls and vellum and things like that. But it's one of the reasons that I'm interested in reading this book, is to see what bits were left out, and what, because some of the very early Christian sects dating back to 100 AD, they believed radically different things from the modern church.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have the proto-Orthodox church that also started, because don't forget, you've got the Roman Catholic Church and you've got the Orthodox Church. And they do things very differently. They have different sacraments. I mean, they both believe in Jesus and God and those sorts of things, but the way that they practice their faith and all of that kind of stuff is very, very different.
But see when you go Old Testament, right, and dig into Genesis, that's mental. It's like a porno. I mean, it really is ridiculous, because they're all having sex with each other. You know, they're like women are drugging their father to have sex with them so they can bear their children. There's giants coming down from heaven and making, Nephilim and all that. God has a wife. God has a wife. I mean, that's a new one. I didn't realise that was in there somewhere. But
well, the thing that always struck me about the Old Testament and the New Testament is that in the Old Testament, the God is wrathful and vengeful and
he's a cunt.
And then
yes.
And then in the New Testament, he's all sweetness and light.
Yeah.
And we've got Christ and all of that kind of stuff. And I always found that contradiction interesting. But one also has to remember that most likely a lot of these stories, because I mean the story about Noah and his ark, that actually dates back further to a Sumerian legend of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Everybody's got the flood legend, but let's just look at remember the golden calf episode, the when they went back to idolatry, when they were meant to be cast out in the desert. This was one of Moses's. This was when they were out in the desert for, what was it, 40? How long were they out in the desert for? 40
I don't know.
Was it years, weeks, or days? I can't remember. But anyway, so they went back to the golden calf and they were worshipping that, and then God was supposed to have sent down venomous snakes to attack them, right? Now, there's a very similar story if we go back to Egypt, where I think it was somebody like Joseph, right, was making some sort of presentation to the Pharaoh, and to prove his worth, he turned his staff into a snake, right? And the Pharaoh's magicians, who were also very adept, turned their staffs into snakes as well. But because Joseph's staff, or snake, had the weight of God behind it, it was able to kill all the other snakes. I mean, some of these stories are they're just wild, and then you start thinking, are these allegories or the analogy? Is it
analogies?
Is it an analogy? Is it is it something like that? You have to really think.
Is it someone spending too much time with fun-coloured mushrooms, or
it could be
desert cacti,
it could be ergot, couldn't it? Because if you store your grain and it gets damp and you get a wee bit of fungus on it, next thing you know, everybody's hallucinating. Everybody's hallucinating, and it's 3 years later. Yeah. Craziness. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, I didn't spend an awful lot of time on it, but it tickled my fancy, and I quite liked it from the point of view that it's a completely different story from the biblical Moses, right? And it did involve that strange looking dude, Akhenaten, who does look a bit like an alien, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, if you Google pictures of him,
yeah,
is a very, very strange skull.
He's definitely not a handsome dude.
Well, I've heard all sorts of different theories about that it's potentially the result of lots of inbreeding, because supposedly Tutankhamun had like a club foot as well.
Yeah.
And then there's also the theories that somehow there's some kind of extraterrestrial DNA that has somehow been mixed up with the pharaohs, because they certainly knew about space. I don't know, you only have to watch the Stargate movie.
Yeah, I know.
With the theory that pyramids were landing pads for alien ships, which I don't actually believe. I think that I don't think that the pyramids were tombs, but I also don't think they were landing pads for alien ships. Possibly somewhere in between. But I mean, Akhenaten, he had a very strange face, very kind of elongated, old chin, just very, very strange looking dude.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, if you look at some of the other pharaohs, they weren't necessarily normal looking people. So one has to wonder.
Yeah,
where on earth that comes from.
Let's see if we can. Let's see if I can call up. My mouse stopped working there for a minute. Let's see if I can call up some of the.
But there's also timeline problems, because, I mean, to me, 1350 odd BCE is it's too late for the pyramids. The pyramids are older than that. I can feel it in my bones.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are quite a lot of issues with your little theory here, I'm afraid.
No, yeah, I wasn't sure on the pyramids thing.
I mean, there's just, the thing is that if Moses was Egyptian, and if the Hebrew slaves were actually Egyptian slaves,
yeah, no, they weren't slaves. That's the thing. They weren't slaves. They were monotheists.
So how did they? Who turned them into Hebrew slaves then?
Nobody did. The Bible did that. So the Bible did. There's Akhenaten there. He is an odd-looking dude.
Because I mean, I did see some other proposed theories about Moses' origin. One theory is that he was an Egyptian priest or court official before joining the Hebrews, which could help explain his education and knowledge helping lead the Exodus, but there's no direct evidence that Moses' thoroughly Hebrew upbringing described in the Bible.
From Militant Mushroom, another version of the Moses story says that his S was a weapon 10.
Keep talking then. Another one is that some speculate Moses was a practicing member of the Egyptian monotheistic religion of Atonism before adopting those beliefs to monotheistic Yahweh worship among the Hebrews. But the timeline does not match between Atonism under Akhenaten and the biblical Exodus under Moses. Fringe theories try to link Moses to ancient Middle Eastern figures like the Babylonian lawgiver Hammurabi, but obviously that's given short shrift by mainstream scholars. There are theories that Moses wasn't even a real historical figure, but rather a symbolic character synthesized from earlier legendary sources. But there is no, I mean, that was one I explored a little bit more. So there are some scholars and theorists who argue that Moses was not actually a real singular person, but rather a symbolic figure compiled from earlier mythic and legendary sources. So a quick summary of those. One theory claims Moses was synthesized from stories about earlier Near Eastern figures like Sargon of Akkad, or an ancient Mesopotamian monarch, who some say had a Moses-like origin story of being sent down the river as a baby. Some argued that there were Mesopotamian legends of a king Mesu that may have contributed to the Moses mythos, though direct links to the biblical Moses are disputed. Others contend that the Moses narrative originated from earlier stories and archetypes about lawgivers, mythical heroes, and fictionalized ancestors that served symbolic purposes in cultures throughout the Near East. Sigmund Freud proposed the idea that Moses was an ancient Egyptian monotheist priest of Akhenaten whose story was later absorbed into Hebrew myth.
That's the one I'm kind of on just now.
Right, so that's Sigmund Freud proposing that one. And then there are more radical theories that try to link Moses to ancient Egyptian or Middle Eastern deities. Supposedly Moses originated as a mythical figure that was eventually historicized. The skeptical views are not widely accepted. Most mainstream scholars still believe that Moses was likely a historical leader, though allowing that stories and legends about him were probably expanded and edited over generations before being compiled into the final biblical text we have today.
Yeah.
The idea of Moses being entirely legendary continues to attract some attention as a more unorthodox counter-argument. I think the idea that he's some sort of facsimile of other characters is a possibility, but I don't know. I mean, it's who are we to question scripture? we're being thoroughly heretical this evening.
Well, but we are the people to question scripture, because if you don't question it, how can you ever determine if it's true or not?
Well, we're rabbit hole explorers, so we question everything.
So, right. So, there are a couple of other wild theories about Moses, and I think one of them that really got to me was that Moses wasn't even in the Middle East, right?
What?
Yeah, no, this was wild, right? So this one is that Moses actually was talking about Utah.
Utah? What?
Yeah. So
you're not. Hang on. You're not.
I'm just not making this up, right? Okay. So
what the hell?
So there's this theory that what was it? Mount Peebo or something like that was in Utah, and there's another mount that you can see from Mount Peebo that was where the promised land was, and it's like it is within walking distance. So what they're saying is that the Moab Desert in Utah is the site of Moses, and then someone then goes on to say, well, that's correct because Egyptians were living in the Grand Canyon. Now you've heard that one about the secret cave in the Grand Canyon that was discovered, and then the guy could never find it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, I've heard of sections of the Grand Canyon that are essentially off limits, and if you happen to venture in there, then suddenly black helicopters appear on the horizon, and there's weird concreted over entrances of some description. I mean, I've just done a very fast bit of research, and according to this crazy theory of yours is actually, it's not complete nonsense, ladies and gentlemen. And I can tell you that John is not drunk and talking out of his haggis eating bumhole. So according to a fringe Mormon belief, a group of Israelites under Moses fled Egypt and sailed across the Atlantic to settle in what is now the state of Utah. This notion stems from the Book of Mormon mentioning a group called the Jaredites, who supposedly migrated to the Americas thousands of years ago. Some LDS, which is the Latter-day Saint, Church of the Latter-day Saints, Mormons.
Yeah.
Some LDS scholars speculate that the Jaredites were actually the same group led by Moses, and that after Moses died, this band of Israelites completed their journey to Utah. A primary proponent of this belief was Mormon author Ethan Smith, who argued in 1825 that Native Americans descended from ancient Israelites. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to... straight face.
Yeah.
Right. Archaeological, genetic, and historical evidence does not support the idea that the Israelites under Moses settled Utah or other parts of the Americas. Mainstream Mormon doctrine does not officially endorse this connection between Moses and Utah. It is confined to the more fringe apologist efforts to link Native Americans to ancient Near East peoples. So, in summary, the link made between Moses specifically leading Israelites to early Utah stems from controversial Mormon attempts to connect Native American ancestry to ancient Israel. Therefore, this fringe view is not supported by evidence, and mainstream LDS theory does not officially claim Utah was settled by Moses's Hebrew followers. But there is, so...
because Moses never made it to the Promised Land, apparently.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so apparently, as he stood and watched the rest of the tribe moving into the Promised Land, he was atop the mount and disappeared. It just disappeared.
So, he just poof, gone by.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right. So
So according to the biblical account, Moses did not enter the Promised Land of Canaan himself before he died.
Yeah.
In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34, it states that Moses went up Mount Nebo, and God showed him the Promised Land from afar.
Yep.
But he would not be allowed to go there himself. God says this punishment is because Moses broke faith when he struck the rock at Meribah to provide water rather than speaking to the rock as God commanded. Moses died on Mount Nebo in Moab after viewing the Promised Land rather than entering it, and he was 120 years old at death. Joshua then became the new leader of the Israelites as they prepared to finally enter Canaan after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness following the Exodus. Some rabbis argue God did not let Moses enter the Promised Land because he would never die, and this would discourage other Israelites from striving to follow his example. So, okay, that's a theory too.
Right, that's it. Right, here's another one. Right, okay. Here's the other one. That Moses was a black guy, right? Okay. And all the black people in America are descendants of Moses and not former slaves.
But you've read Roots. People have read Alex Haley's book.
Yeah.
It was LeVar Burton of Star Trek fame, Geordie LaForge. She played young Kunta Kinte. I mean, it's very powerful. It looks quite dated now, but it's an incredibly powerful series, and it's an even more powerful book. And I mean, supposedly Alex Haley traced, because he was one of these slave families where some of these names were passed down, and he actually decided to go on a mission to try and figure out who his original ancestors and stuff, and actually traced them back to Africa, and supposedly he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the whole journey he went through in Roots. But it's a very powerful account of slavery and beastly period.
I'm not actually suggesting that Moses was indeed the forerunner of the African American community. Anyway, Militant Mushroom, who gave us that very kind donation, said that he thought the staff was a weapon, and indeed it does appear to be. It's described as a weapon of warfare. Exodus 4:1-12. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say the Lord did not appear to you?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," he replied. The Lord said, "Throw it to the ground." Moses threw it to the ground and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. Then Exodus 9:23. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven. And the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So and then there's another one where they're having a battle with the Arimatheans or something like that, and when Moses puts his rod up, things go well for the good guys, and when he puts his arm down, the battle starts to turn the tide. So yes, the rod of God and the staff of Moses is the same thing.
And apparently he didn't ever smack anything with it. That supposedly the biblical text, that there's no examples of him using the staff to intentionally harm others by using it as a weapon. He parted the sea, drowned the Egyptian army, or brought plagues. They were acts of God accomplished through the staff, not Moses' warring with it. So the staff's power came from God, not inherent qualities of the staff itself.
Yeah.
So it served primarily as a symbolic conduit for divine authority rather than a practical tool for offense or defense in military action.
A weapon of spiritual warfare.
But apparently he could smack a rock with the staff to bring water out of the rock.
That's what you were just talking about, because that's why he didn't get into thingy, because he was supposed to just speak to the rock, and he smacked it instead.
You got to feel sorry for the poor rock, thinking it's going to have a nice chat with Moses and get smacked around the chops for its trouble. I mean, what is the water that comes out of the rock after Moses struck it with the staff? Is that the rock crying?
I'm not sure.
I shouldn't be flippant about biblical stories. I'm sorry for any religious people in the house. I'm not being disrespectful to Moses. But it's. I mean, the staff is an interesting one because you've got wizards, and I mean, I was thinking Gandalf, but there's plenty of examples of. Yeah, I mean, the staffs are kind of staffs. What's the plural of a staff?
Stave, I think. Is it staves?
Yeah, no, I think it's staves. I mean, it's an interesting one, but the thing about Moses is the Moses story that always gets me is the parting of the waves.
Yeah,
and it's. I mean, are we talking about
literal
something that literally happened? Are we talking about Moses making use of something like an earthquake, where he knew that some sort of, I don't know, that there was some sort of movement in the earth which facilitated the parting of the waves?
Like a tsunami. So the water would pull back, you would run across, and then...
but in the story, the waves actually part. It's not like the waves just disappear off one side.
Right, yeah, okay. I know you say that, but, I mean... This was how long ago? You know,
thousands of years. I mean,
stories,
it's like 3,500 years ago.
Bloody hell! You can't even get the story right when it comes to the First World War. You know,
it's a fair point. It's a fair point. But then, the thing is that the Bible stories are very clear about Moses parting the waves. So it just makes me wonder, what was this? Because they didn't say, "Oh, we magic some boats out of nowhere." It was he parted the waves, and the Israelites traveled through, and then he unparted the waves, and the Egyptian army got drowned, and the slaves were able to escape.
But my story was that they didn't, because the battle occurred on the sea. And that's what the hieroglyphs. That's what the hieroglyphs show us. The sea battle.
So was it the Red Sea that he parted?
Well, apparently, and the Red Sea's massive, and it's deep. That's really deep.
The Red Sea is very, 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 very deep. I mean,
you can't do it. You can't do that. That's just nonsense, right?
I mean, the deepest technical dive that I know about in the Red Sea was an Egyptian military diver, and he did 325 meters.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The most. I mean, if you see pictures of him, he has the most insane number of decompression tanks, because it took him. I think
hours, if not days.
Well, it took him half an hour to get down, and then something
3 days
like
to get back up.
Yeah, I mean, it was something crazy. I'd have to look up the exact numbers, but he was decompressing for over 24 hours. Which must also have been mind-numbingly boring. But I've seen pictures of him heading off, and I mean, because I've done technical diving with one little decompression tank, and you basically carry tanks for each stages, and each tank has potentially got different levels of helium and oxygen and everything else. But I mean, for him to actually try and figure out what tank he was supposed to be using when, having been down at just crazy amounts of that's nuts diving. Anyway, so the whole notion of parting the Red Sea, as a scuba diver, I find this.
It's not tenable.
Really,
it's not tenable.
I mean, it's. I mean, how do you part? Like, I don't know what the maximum depth of the Red Sea is, but it's a lot.
No, so if you think, could it be something like, well, the Red Sea is tidal, but it's not tidal to that extent. But the thing is, would there be an inlet or something that they could cross, or a river, that leads into the Red Sea? So could it be something like that?
I mean, both sides of the Red Sea are desert.
Yeah.
I mean, the story is perhaps maybe slightly more plausible if we're talking about pre-melting of pre-Younger Dryas, before this, because the sea levels rose like 100 to 200 meters very, very quickly. So pre that.
Well, if it was pre, I suppose smaller. It could have been pre-Younger Dryas.
I mean, that. Then the problem with that is that we're then talking 14,000 years, 12,000 years ago. Which is complete. I mean, that just throws the whole biblical timeline completely in the bin. Yeah, but
I think the whole biblical timeline is just made up.
It could well be.
Yeah. I mean, some could say that it's a book of fiction, not fact.
Well, I think that I don't necessarily think it's fiction by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there's a lot of allegory and metaphor.
Well, do you think how accurate do you think the things about ages and things like that are in it?
Well, that's a good question. Compared to what a relatively modern human lifespan is, I mean, because there are some of these biblical characters are supposed to have lived like 500 years. I mean, Moses being 120 when he died, having just led his people across the desert. I mean, that's 120. I don't know many 120-year-olds. Well, I don't know any 120-year-olds, but of the 120-year-old people I've heard about, and none of them are walking across a desert, let alone up mountains or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is with the Bible is that they give some of these people very specific ages, and I mean, some of them were alive for like 500 years.
Yeah.
Which
allegedly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, because you don't necessarily, I mean, were human lifespans different in the ancient past? Who knows?
What about What about Lot's wife turning to salt, a pillar of salt? What's all that about?
But that was Sodom and Gomorrah, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, but it was
Yeah,
Lot's.
she
It
was
was Lot's
told not
wife.
to that-
She looked back, didn't she?
Yeah,
Sodom and Gomorrah were the cities, weren't they?
yeah. I have actually heard an interesting. I don't know if anybody is who else is familiar with Zachariah Stitchin, but he's the guy who came up with the whole Anunnaki 12th planet thing.
Mm-hmm.
And his theory about that story in the Bible is that there was some sort of war that was a nuclear war, effectively, and that somehow by turning back, she was exposed to the nuclear blast or something like that, and the flash. I don't know. It's I don't remember the exact details of the story, but
sounds like bullshit.
I'm not saying it isn't, although I did not do a very good job of explaining it.
It could, yeah, I've heard that kind of theory as well. But I mean, to be fair, if you're traveling in a group, they would have to have dropped back some considerable distance of getting hit by a blast, and you weren't.
But
you know,
how is it any less bullshit than the woman turning round and turning to salt? I mean,
oh well, no, I think that's bullshit as well. I don't think that happened unless you've got alien death rays. I don't know. Maybe it was an alien death ray.
Well, the Stitchin theory is that there was two. That there were two of these alien Anunnaki that were battling it out, and they destroyed the two cities. There are interesting deposits of glass in the Sinai.
Well, there's glass all over North Africa, because you've got an awful lot of. Did you not get an awful lot of meteorite strikes in the desert?
But there's patches of glass in the Sinai which don't track with meteorite impacts because they're spread over too large an area.
Airburst.
That's one of the unconventional explanations about it. I mean, who knows? Because if you look at the Indians. And the what is it, that ancient text, the
Vimanas,
because you've got the
Vimanas and the what do they call the text, I can't remember what they call
Mahabharata or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
The Vimanas are the flying machines.
Yeah, and they actually have texts on how to build them and how to fly them. They're all part of the ancient Indian text, but they also talk about like the floating cities in the air, and gods waging war with these.
And then there's the stories,
death rays, and
then there's the story about the U.S. Marines are supposed to have found one in a cave. You heard that one?
I have not heard that one.
There's a rabbit hole for you.
Why didn't you bring that? Why didn't you bring that into our UFO rabbit hole?
Because I just remembered it there.
Not really joking.
So, but that could be another rabbit hole that we want to get down at some point.
Yeah, no, we can certainly add it to the list.
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty exhausted of this one now. Have you got anything you want to add?
No, not that I can think of.
Chat, people of the chat, citizens of Veridora and others. Anything interesting that you want to talk about? They're talking about bushes burning. When I was at school in Hong Kong, the religious education teacher was actually very good, and he used to tell you the biblical kind of story, and then he would tell you reasons why it could be true, but how it could actually be scientifically true as well, like manna from heaven, because there's this plant that flowers, like once every 12 years or something like that, and when it does, and the winds pick it up and it falls down, you can eat the fruit off it. So that could technically be manna from heaven, So where are we looking at? Ethiopia is amazing. I don't know an awful lot about Ethiopia. Pole shift. I think we're still talking about parting the waters there. Commercial oil.
The pole shift. I mean, the thing with the Ben Davidson's and the suspicious observers catastrophe theory doesn't leave. I mean, that's more on the Noah's Ark kind of biblical story rather than the parting of the waves sort of biblical story, because when that pole shift happens and we get the earth crust displacement and things start moving around and we get large tsunamis, that's not parting waves, and they inundate everybody, Egyptians, Hebrews, the whole lot.
So
although, I mean, to be honest, that whole catastrophe, that should really be on a rabbit hole list as well, because that's a good one.
And then we've got the Ark of the Covenant, so they're talking about that. So you can definitely put that in a rabbit hole. Johnny John says that India is a specialist subject of his, apart from orange. He didn't mention orange. Is he at it?
Good.
Man has another rabbit hole. Human spirit. That was from Militant Mushroom. I don't know. I think interesting. So there's someone in the chat called Shanty, who's apparently Lou, I believe. That's a new one on me as well. Is that one of yours? One of your friends?
Shanty. Yeah, no, I think that's one of my Twitter followers. Name rings a bell.
Cool. John says, "Ask me anything about India." Okay, what about the natural nuclear reactor? Tell me about that.
Oh dear, good one. That was a good curveball. This is about rabbit holes. This is not about Indian politics.
Yeah.
I don't even know about anything about Indian politics.
Yeah. So I've had a reasonable time tonight. I probably didn't do as much background as I should have, but then again, I'm no Ed. I'm just here to fill in, you know.
Well, it's just the extra carrots, and at the end of the day, to do one of the normal rabbit hole episodes does take.
It does. Well, that's why you get 2 weeks. You used to get a whole month. Now we just give you 2 weeks.
I can do it in 2 weeks, because after doing quite a few of them month by month, I kind of worked out some techniques of pulling in research and stuff like that. So yeah, but we've got Jill Dando next week, which is going to be an interesting one. I know there's quite a lot of people. We had quite a lot of interest on the poll for that one. So Cecil Rhodes is staying on the list because I definitely think we should cover him.
Yeah,
still.
I'd like to. I'm interested in that one myself. Jill Dando, did you ever watch the Richard D. Hall one on Jill Dando?
Yes.
Yeah, it was quite good, I thought. I do like Richard's stuff. I thought he was well researched and well presented.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't understand why. I don't understand why he ended up the way he did. You know, with everybody having a go at him, because maybe it was just his manner. I don't know.
I think it was his manner. I think some of his theories were a bit out there.
Not as many as some.
Well, that's true. I mean, some of the more outlandish ones, but I think some people can be relatively off-putting. And I mean, if you see some of the interviews with him and stuff, he's not. He just.
Well, I suppose you've got to be careful, I suppose. And then, I mean, the one that always got me was Neil Saunders used to be on his show quite a lot as his kind of right-hand man, and now he's gone the other way. And yet, Neil Saunders always said that his stuff was well researched, and I just don't understand it. Anyway, that's pretty much
there is
where we
such
are.
thing as I know, but there is such thing as too well researched. If you look at that show Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, which was that was the show what was her name? It was the one where he met the doctor, and she flew in and told him about this theory that she'd heard about, that they were going to introduce, they were going to depopulate and stuff like that. Rima Libo, that was the one,
right? Okay,
but they did two seasons of that show, and the first 2 seasons of it were really good, and then I think he got paid. He ended up actually getting paid off And he was laughing because he bought this ranch in New Mexico with them because they broke the contract. And so there was contractual obligations in that. So they had to pay him a massive amount of money, essentially to shut him up because he was, and the show had a pretty good budget. And given time, he was going to explore some serious rabbit holes and most likely piss off some very important rich people.
Yeah, I remember him interviewing David Icke. It didn't go well for David Icke.
No, but then Jesse. I mean, it's Jesse Ventura is a weird one, though.
Yeah, he is. He's former governor.
Yeah,
they call me the governor. Anyway, I'd like to thank all the people that have come along to watch us tonight. So thank you very much. It's been great. Ed, anything to say?
No, just thanks for joining us, and it's been fun. I've little chat about Moses and religious things, always good. Looking forward to Jill Dando tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Next week.
Yeah.
And thanks for having me on again. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, it's been good. So I'd like to thank everyone for nipping along to our little extra carrots. Hope you've had a little bit of fun. I've quite enjoyed this one, I must admit, even though it's just been a bit off the wall with some wild theories about ancient Egypt. And, when you're talking about stuff that's 12,000 years old, really, how accurate can you ever be? But, as always, we know one thing that's accurate. It's been great for you.
'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yo, I got a lot of shit to say, so I'ma do this every day. I'll be writing things until I'm fucking buried in my grave. 6 feet deep under, but my body won't decay. 'Cause my messages are timeless, so they'll put them on display. Oh yeah, I rap with a certainty, I have a sense of urgency. A message for eternity, for everyone internally. I had some people burning me, but now they fucking learn to see I ain't the one to fuck with. Now they looking nervously, and I don't really care what you think of me respectfully. You can kick rocks if you think you're fucking better, see. I will outwork you, turn you to an enemy. Hurt you so bad that you're gonna need some therapy. I got the motherfucking recipe. I've been cooking up hits, I'ma leave a legacy. You'll be looking small when you're standing right next to me. I'm 5'10", bitch, but I'm 10 feet. 'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. 'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. Yeah, I'ma do it my way. I can't contain it, I'm coming out with a statement. You really changed, man, all your music and arrangement. You don't know shit, shut your mouth, you can save it. I'm the same dude that got his come up from the basement. 100 songs, 100 weeks, didn't change it. Experiments, development, intelligence, and patience. I'll do it all again, 'cause I never feel complacent. Let's keep the good vibes, positivity's contagious. I'm never looking back, 'cause I made a life that's passionate. A college graduate suppressing all his talents, yeah. He found a way to go and change, become an advocate. For taking control of your life, go out and battle. And you think you have a dream, then act on it. Get after it, get out your head and fucking capture it. You got one life to master it. Don't give up on your future, we all start losers. We're all late bloomers, gotta struggle through the sewer. What you say? Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want to make. 'Cause I don't give a fuck what you say. Yeah, I'ma do shit my way. So you can go kick rocks, I'ma stack bricks up, build what I want